All right, Matt. So I really appreciate you joining me on this episode of the Grow Rogue podcast. I'm super excited to talk to you today because a big theme that we're going to cover is that like sales and marketing alignment. But before we get into that, I just want to learn a little bit more about your background and what got you into your current role.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I spent a long time in telco and then transitioned over into I guess software back 10, 12 years ago. And I've been in leadership for a long time, but one of the things that I noticed coming into the industry, because I came in as an IC just so I could understand the business. And I noticed there was I came in actually on the marketing side, a lot of disconnect between marketing and sales, and that whole relationship seemed to be siloed. So I guess that was one of the first things that I noticed. And 9 months after, I guess I came in, I went ahead and moved back into management, and from there, I transitioned on up, built out a BDR organization, and then went back into sales leadership. So one of the things that I guess from a focus perspective has always been making sure that those two teams feel as though it's combined, instead of it being, well, marketing's got these KPIs and sales has these, but they don't always seem to be aligned, and you've got folks that are kind of fighting for their part in the revenue contribution. But at the end of the day, I mean, ultimately you're trying to build a relationship with a prospect, and it starts with marketing and should transition, right? So it was one of the things that I noticed at Informatica, which is a company that I built the BDR organization for. There was a dire need for that relationship to be mended, if you will. So that was kind of like step number one: get everybody in a room. Let's talk about what we all need from each other, and let's make sure that we're not trying to go after the same goal. Because ultimately, if you put a carrot out there and both people are chasing it, you're asking for conflict. So
That makes sense. All right, so you're in the Austin area, correct?
yeah, yep. I'm based in Austin.
So Austin is this unique. Some people, I think, there's like this popular conception of Austin as as in terms of its like business relevance as like the startup capital of Texas, or like the new Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Number one, how true is that? And two, I imagine that has at least put you in some situations with early stage and growth stage startups. And so maybe talk a little bit about what building sales teams is like at that level.
Yeah, so I mean, it is true just from an overall environment. I mean, it's a startup heavy, and you see them pop up on a daily basis. So it did give me an opportunity to get from AT&T Corporation, big corporation, to actually get to a place where I felt an impact could be made, and I could help contribute. Kind of get my hands dirty and actually fix or build. As far as transitioning in, I mean, I did go from large corporation, and then I guess transitioning down to where I could have a voice was something that took a little bit of getting used to. But I joined a startup that was right at that inflection point where things had to change. CEO had reached their capacity, couldn't sell and run the business. So I came in at a good time at that startup, and I'd built teams before in retail, but it was a much different experience because, again, at a large corporation, you've already got the process, you already got the tools, you kind of know what to expect, whereas you walk into a startup like I did, and it was like, okay, we don't have that, so we need to figure all this out. A lot of times what happens, people start a little bit too far ahead in the process, so they run out. We need to increase revenue, so let's go out and hire some salespeople. Not the right approach necessarily if you don't have the framework established to where you are ready for that. And it's something that when I came into the startup, they had hired a bunch of salespeople, and then you've got people that are not selling because they don't have the demand side of things going. They don't have the brand recognition. They don't have that. So it was a good opportunity for me to get in and actually work with some of the executive leadership at a startup, see kind of the ins and outs, and be involved in some of that process. Building out the culture that I felt was important in order to make it work. And it goes back to that whole building it to where marketing and sales are one and the same, and also CS even. I mean, it should be a pod approach where everybody's involved, because ultimately it's all centered around the customer, or the prospect.
All right, so that is really interesting to me, right? And I'm in alignment with you on that. Is that the distinction between sales, marketing, and customer service is it's a harmful differentiation, right? So as an executive, or if you're advising, let's say you're advising a CEO, maybe they're a little bit younger CEO, maybe they're new to kind of this fast growth pace, and the person you're advising, this executive, this CEO, well, they've got a head of marketing who's talented, is capable. They've got a head of sales who's just as talented, capable, and then they've got customer service just as talented and capable. What are you doing to get them all, or how are you advising that CEO to get them all really working on the same wavelength?
Well, so I think you first have to come in and look at what goals have been established, what expectations have been set. If you got a standard, at least from the CEO's perspective, on what they expect visionary wise, then it's a matter of finding out how are the organizations set up to actually work together. Is it that you've got BDR organizations and sales with very similar quotas and expectations, same account set? Are you creating an environment where you're going to have competition, and not the friendly kind, like the kind that you've got folks that are kind of fighting over stuff? Or is it that you've actually built an opportunity for people to target an account together and actually go and leverage each other's strengths? Because it is a different profile. You've got BDRs are certainly an intricate part of building out the front end of the pipeline, and sales should be too. They certainly have their role in it, but I think it's important to find out how do they have it established, and then taking it on the backside. So what happens after that sale happens? Does that sales rep stay engaged? Is CSM brought in at in the beginning? What's that look like? Who's handling upsells? So it kind of depends on what's been set from an expectation. Normally the conversation goes to, slow down. We don't need to hire a bunch of salespeople yet. Let's first see what we've got from a demand perspective. Do we have enough demand? And if we don't, then we probably need to work there first. If we do have the demand, then where's the conversion drop off? Because there's going to be. So understanding why that is, and a lot of times it's process. Like there's not a qualification process is weak, or the handoff process is broken, or a number of things. Maybe you've got too much money invested in pay-per-click versus events or whatnot. So it really is coming in and kind of taking a look at status quo and seeing where's everything at now, and then building out the relationships between the groups. So I think that's kind of step one after you've evaluated, is you get everybody in the room and say, okay, here's what we all need. Here's what our expectation is as a company. Everything's set aside. Let's put together some process where everybody agrees on it. So then it's not a matter of, well, I got credit for that and you didn't. The process is what we've defined, and there shouldn't be any concern after that, right? So you built the framework, and then it's it takes work to continue those relationships. It can't be a one and done. You can't come in and build out a plan and then never meet to revisit it. It needs to be a consistent communication and reinforcement for both sides, on both teams.
What does sales actually need from marketing for them to be successful? This is an often fought over question, right? But plain and simple, what does sales actually need from their marketing team?
So they need visibility. Brand recognition is important. They need the visibility from the company perspective, so prospect understands what the company does. They need to have a connection to somebody that has an impact or can have an impact on a decision within the business. And then they need to have some qualification, does it make sense to engage right now? I think a lot of times you've got You've got marketing that's focused on volume of leads and conversions and SQLs and MQLs and all of those metrics, which are very important. But at the end of the day, if MQLs turn into SQLs, then that means they've given us a lead that made sense at that time. So I think most importantly, it's not only just identifying who are our prospects, but who are the most likely to convert or most likely interested. And then from there, it's a matter of taking it further in the qualification. But I think the main thing is the relationship and then, I guess, handing off. So they have to stay engaged to some degree. I mean, when I built the BDRs, I incorporated an incentive program where they had to stay engaged because they had on the back end, what converted, they got paid on. And granted, they were a BDR, but still, I mean, they had incentive because I felt skin in the game was important. So if they were bought into the revenue side of things, then they're going to push for those qualified meetings versus, I need to get 10 meetings this week because that's my metric.
All right. Conversely, for successful relationships between sales and marketing, what does marketing need from their sales teams?
Follow-up. Honestly, follow-up is the main thing. And that's the main disconnect. You've got salespeople notorious for, I'm going to reach out once, maybe twice, and if I don't get what I need, instant gratification, I'm moving on to the next, and I'm going to say that it wasn't qualified. Well, the reality is, I mean, the number of touches that it takes to get a prospect from, prospect to buyer is a lot. And sales, we're not always patient when it comes to stuff like that. So I think it's follow-up and consistency. And you're going to have those times when, a lead disengages. Are we, as a sales organization, are we pulling marketing back in? Like, what's that? It's the relationship side of things. Where's the coordination between the two groups? Marketing tends to focus on the lead side of things, and I think for sales, there needs to be a tie between revenue and lead conversion. And I don't know that a lot of times that's something that's necessarily put in place whenever they're looking at process. I think sometimes it is siloed. But follow-up is probably the main thing. You can throw a lot of leads at somebody, and if they never follow up, it's a waste of everyone's time and money. So
I completely agree. So, all right, I want to fire some quick takes at you, Matt. What is a common sales or marketing belief that you completely disagree with? Like a huge myth that if people could just get this out of their heads, or if organizations could just root this out, that it would help everybody.
that's a good question. I mean, I think what a qualified lead looks like, I think that's a great topic that I think everybody debates on. For marketing, it's I've got somebody that may or may not be interested. For sales, there's only a certain number of hours in the day, and sales are expected, or they should be, to be prospecting and hunting just like, marketing would be. So it's less of a volume and more of a quality. Granted, volume has to be there, or they have to see value coming from BDRs, but they're not worried about having 15 meetings a week. They would like to have 3 or 4 that are really good meetings. So I would say the myth of this is qualified, it's ready to close. Well, no, it's far from ready to close. It's that whole happy years, I've got you a good lead, things are great. Well, it's a lead, yes. Beyond that, I mean, is it ready to move through the funnel? A lot of times that's the disconnect. And again, it's set up, unfortunately, a lot of times it's set up that way because the company's implemented an incentive on what they feel is adequate coming from marketing. Like, hey, you've checked the box if you do this. That doesn't always translate. On the flip side, I would say from a marketing perspective, there seems to be a consensus that, sales is just out kind of hanging out, having lunch and going by and visiting offices and whatnot. And it's not a day-to-day grind. And I think spending some time actually going through what that looks like would help alleviate some of that confusion, because unfortunately it's not lunches and spending time whining and dining. I mean, there's a lot of grunt work that goes along with it. So I think a lot of it's perception and lack of visibility into what it is. And the way you fix that is you incorporate ride-alongs. you have somebody go through the entire process together. You can't do it every time, clearly, but if they're not closing or part of that closing at least some of the time, then there's always going to be a misconception.
So I really like that as a very practical takeaway. So I almost want to just repeat that back to you. And this is a really great take on this whole sales and marketing alignment. We've gotten answers addressing that range everywhere from, these workshops and company trips and all that stuff. And those things have their place. I'll grant it. They have their place. But what you're describing seems like so much more attainable. Hey, have marketing go tag along with a sales guy or join a sales meeting so they understand the actual process of getting the important details from the prospect that are actually needed to put together a proposal or to make a recommendation for a product or service. And then I would say, it sounds like you're also saying this, but I would definitely include, as a marketing guy who's done a lot of sales, having the sales team involved in some of the marketing from like a content creation standpoint, getting that feedback. Number one, marketing is going to get some really, really valuable info from that. I can say that from experience.
Right.
But two, sales is really going to understand, or they're going to get a better understanding of what it actually takes to generate leads, to nurture leads, and what marketing is doing to support that nurture while sales is doing their work, kind of that grunt work that you described, that boots on the ground. So I think just having them in the room, not just to talk every now and then, but to actually be involved in one another's job for a little while
shows
would be
the appreciation for what everybody else is doing. I mean, and a lot of times you don't have that if you don't have visibility into it. So seeing what somebody has to go through. I mean, marketing, to me, BDR's marketing demand gen is probably one of the toughest jobs, if not the toughest job in a company, because you're taking the most rejection. You're dealing with a lot to get it to a point where you do hand it off to sales. And then to have somebody say, well, it's not qualified, or this is a waste of time, you threw something over the fence. I mean, it's deflating for one, and after being rejected as much as they are, because it's a tough job. And I've done it. When I came into this business, I started there because I needed to understand, like, where does it start and what does that look like? And maybe that's the reason why I try to build it the way I do, because I've been on both sides of that fence. Like, I've seen what happens when I hand a lead over to sales and they never do anything with it. It's like, why did we do that? Having an appreciation for what the other does, I think, is important.
All right, Matt. Well, I mean, this has been really, really helpful, I know, for a lot of executives and leaders at, early stage and growth stage businesses, but also at larger, more established companies who are dealing with that issue of like, well, sales and marketing are just not really communicating, right? Or they're not working together as well as they can. And we got great people on both sides. And we just want to be able to work better together. Matt, since you've been so helpful, I want to make sure that our audience can learn more from you and they can follow you. So do you mind just sharing the best way to get in touch with you, the best way to learn from you?
Yeah, no, sure. So LinkedIn obviously is a good place. Matt Hudson. The company name is Startup to the number 2 Scale, and you can at www.startuptoscale.us. But yeah, I mean, reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm typically on trying to answer questions or offer what insight I have, and certainly learning from others. So I would say LinkedIn's probably the best.
Perfect. And of course, all of those links in the description here on YouTube if you're watching there. And if it's on social media, just give me a direct message and I'll put you directly in touch with Matt. Matt, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Grow Rogue podcast. For everybody who's watching, make sure to share this with a colleague, send this to a friend who's in that spot where a little bit of support, a little bit of help would really help them get over the edge. That would mean a lot to us. It would make us feel like the job we're doing is worthwhile. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Reade. Have a good one.